Awesome. Holy schmolies, there we go. All right, now we are not on the original URL that I had scheduled. So what we need to see is if the people in the other video show up. Excuse me. All right. Let me get the URL for this. I can go share it with everyone. All right, awesome. Got people showing up. Cool. All right, good to go. Got y'all. All right, guys. Yeah, my apologies on that. There's like a special key that YouTube changed today, or like this afternoon. Yeah, we're behind schedule a little bit, but that's okay. All right, because I got time. I figured something like this could possibly happen, so being prepared and made time for it. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into this, and other people, if they show up, that's great. If they don't, this will go on the channel, so they'll be able to watch it then. First and foremost, if you've been here before, maybe not on YouTube live stream, because this is the first live stream I've done, but the other webinars that I've done before, I'm using GoToWebinar. Y'all know I'm all about questions. I know it's posted there, but by all means, please ask them, and I'll be sure to check and get back to you. Just be patient with me. Sometimes I get on a roll, and I want to stick with it. Yes, Brandon. Yeah, you're here. This is State of the Marsh. All right, good to see everyone here. Tommy's there. Coastal Lures, good to go. Team Last All. All right, got some people showing up. So let's go ahead. And let me start pulling all this other stuff up. I had to put it away. All right. Where's January? There we are. Very good. All right, guys, let me switch over to my desktop here. Oop. So check this out. We're going to start out with the past conditions, past being last month. Okay, then we're going to go into current conditions and kind of what we can look forward to in the future, right? Because the conditions are changing. And we as anglers, we need to change. We need to adjust if we are to stay on fish. And fish, we have been catching fish. There's been plenty of redfish, speckled trout. And just because here in Louisiana we've had a lot of fresh water in the last few years, there's been some bass, all right? So let's start out with the January water temperature. And this is a graph I pulled up for the month of January for the Shell Beach buoy. And what we saw in January, it wasn't a cooling trend. We just kind of had like a warm spike there around the new year. But for the most part, the water temperature has remained stable in like the mid to high 50s. So we were in that good, winter water temperature. I know that here on the Shell Beach buoy, it says something like 67.8 degrees there in the beginning of January, but the water temperature is always warmer at the Shell Beach buoy. It's much colder out in the Biloxi Marsh. That's totally something in my eye. It's much colder out in the Biloxi Marsh, Hopedale. I don't remember what I saw in Delacroix. And it was definitely warmer. Not as warm as the Shell Beach buoy, but warmer than the Biloxi Marsh and all that around the Mr. Go and Chalmette. And I'm pretty sure that's because that body of water is deeper, so it's harder to cool off, and it's protected by those walls and those big levees from that northwest wind. So water temperature was low. It was in the winter range. And because of that, once the water temperature got low and the water got low, we didn't see a whole lot of shrimp I want to say actually it wasn't until the end of last month, like January 21st, when inshore like trawling for white shrimp was just canked altogether because they weren't seeing a whole lot of shrimp that were over 100 count. So that was actually a pretty long run of white shrimp, but the biggest run was back in the fall time when they're all headed out towards the Gulf of Mexico for their spawn, and then they left, and we were left with demersal finfish, which is like croakers, like juvenile croakers, cockahos, storm minnows, potbelly minnows, better known as mosquito fish. Mullet and pogies kind of took off too. They're out doing their spawn, but they're about to come back, right? Violet gobies, that was another one that fish were eating, violet gobies. So we were targeting, I know I was anyways, targeting speckled trout in those areas that those demersal finfish lived. And a really good one was the wall and the rocks in the Mr. Go next to the wall. Caught limits out there consistently the entire winter. But all that's about to change, right? So let's pull up current conditions. And actually real quick, let me see if we have any questions. All right. Oop. D. Alley asking what works best for the gnats like they had Saturday morning. What's that stuff called? Amber Romance. That's it. No, the trout have not. I have a question here. Have the trout started making their transition back out yet? No way. It's February. Absolutely not. Okay, cool. All right, let's continue on here. Let's see, where is that window? All right, we got water levels for February. There we go. Now we're rocking and rolling. All right, guys, continuing on here. So I have, again, the Shell Beach buoy pulled up. And we're looking here at the water levels for February. What's happened so far this month, even though we're only 18 days in. For the most part, water never really got crazy low. And I know I like my red line and blue line, but also, compare that to the actual water level, the numbers that you see on the left and right hand side of that graph. And anytime really when that red line gets down towards zero, that's when water really starts to get dirty. And I know people talked a lot about, oh, there's dirty water, there's dirty water. Well, if you go to the shallow marsh the day after I got hit by a cold front, yeah, it's going to be dirty. It will be dirty every time. But there's still tons of clean water out there, especially in that deeper water, in the Mr. Go, or like on the other side of grass mats, etc. So let's not even bother with wind. No point going over that. Now here's the most important thing right here. We can see this water temperature for the month of February, and it's warming. We're no longer in a stable 50-something degree of water temperature. The water temperature is no longer stable. It's a warming trend. Okay, so this means several things. Fish are cold-blooded. So when that water temperature is really low, their metabolism is really low. They're not going to eat a whole lot. We did catch limits of speckled trout, redfish, and all that consistently through the winter. However, I found it usually happened in shorter windows during the evening. And for those of you who are members of LAFB Elite, you've seen my fishing trip reviews where I record the fishing trips. And when did I do best? It was in the evening. And then there were plenty of other fishing trips that weren't, fishing trip reviews that I went on, but I posted reports for, and I did best in the evening. I mean, as soon as that sun got covered up by some low-lying clouds or trees, it was on like Donkey Kong for 30 minutes to an hour, and then after that, boom, it's just shut down. Okay, so those fish were feeding in short windows, but now that the water temperature is warmer and will continue to get warmer, they have no choice. They're cold-blooded. Their metabolism is going to increase. They have to eat, and this is good for them because looking at my list here, with that warmer temperature, we're going to get more plankton. You know how the water gets really clean, like really clear in the marsh during the winter, and then maybe during the summertime it isn't? Well, that's because that colder water temperature kills off all the plankton, phytoplankton, zooplankton, just plankton. With that plankton coming back, the shrimp are going to have something to eat. Okay, everything in the entire food chain stacks on top of that plankton. With the plankton coming back, everything else is going to be able to eat. Everything else is going to come out and expose itself to eat. And when it does, it'll be there and it'll be available for the speckled trout, for the redfish, for the flounder, for the bass, etc. So, something else we need to be keeping an eye out for as the water temperature improves, as it gets warmer, is the brown shrimp migration. If white shrimp leave in the fall time, brown shrimp leave the marsh in the springtime. They're like polar opposite. And and when they do, they're going to be taking those tide lines out. Okay, so if you remember during the fall time, like a little trenasse, that would be like a sidewalk. Using the analogy that different bodies of moving water are the equivalent of like a sidewalk or a street or a highway. And using that analogy, the ways that we ambushed, or rather speckled trout were ambushing white shrimp during the fall time, they will do the same with brown shrimp, except they'll be on their way out. So in the same way we targeted speckled trout in the fall time, we will be able to start targeting speckled trout now even. So I don't think tide was terribly important during the winter. It's certainly nice to have. But I know the speckled trout I caught were moving. They weren't, because I would see them on side imaging while I'm trolling. You could just see them, pow, 3, 4, 5 of them just flying past the boat. They weren't really staying put in one spot. So the brown shrimp will begin moving out. But at the same time, the pogies and the mullet are going to come back. So there's going to be tons and tons and tons and tons of bait. And we'll have the baby pogies. Okay, not necessarily the big adult ones. And that's fine, that's good. But the small bite-sized ones. The ones that look like, where did I put it? The ones that look exactly like this bait right here. This was an awesome bait during the fall and winter time. And it'll be good during the springtime too. So, let's see, I'm looking at this. Grass is going to begin growing again, and this is really good for redfish. Juvenile redfish are in the marsh year-round, but that grass, that really thick grass, some people don't like it, okay, but it's good. It's really good because it provides a place for bait to hide, so you know where bait's going to be, especially those shrimp, those little smaller crabs and minnows and whatnot. And they can form like a hard grass line, which is basically a second shoreline you can locate redfish on. So if you go into like a really salty, saltwater kind of marsh and you don't have that aquatic grass, you have less real estate to fish. And you don't have that grass keeping the water clean. It's basically a giant filter. So we'll get more grass as the water temperature improves, and that'll be great for redfish. And if you like largemouth bass, if that's your thing, hey, it's good for the bass too. And fish will begin feeding in longer windows. Now, these are all things that we have and we're going to have coming. Something else that we have coming too that really isn't all that great. So we got a high Mississippi River. And let me see if I can't zoom in a little bit here so y'all can get a better look at that. There we go. See, how does that look to y'all? Looks better. All right. Guys, the Mississippi River is already at 14 foot. And it's forecasted to get up to 16 foot. And flood stage at the Carrollton gauge, which this is the Carrollton gauge, is 17 foot. So I'm calling it now. I don't want Bonnie Carey to be open, but it could happen. And if that happens, it stands to really hose the spring trout bite. And it happened last year, and it wasn't that bad, but we didn't have the awesome spring run a speckled trout like we had the year before. So if you're on the east side of the state and you like fishing Lake Pontchartrain, please keep your fingers crossed that they don't open that thing and that we just continue to have that saltier water. Now, with that said, let's look over here. This is a salinity map from Hydrocoast for southeast of Louisiana. They make them for the Pontchartrain and Barataria Bay basins. And this is obviously the Pontchartrain side of things. And I'll tell you right now, you zoom in and you look at where it is. I've been catching speckled trout, which is, the Mr. Go. That salinity is 2 parts per thousand. And if you taste the water out there, it hardly tastes salty at all. 2 parts per thousand. And I tried fishing saltier waters out towards Breton Sound, and if there were speckled trout out there, I didn't find them. But that saltier water is something like 15 parts per thousand, and full strength salt water is 35 parts per thousand, just as a reference for you. If y'all remember, in fall of 2016, in spring of 2017, when we had that awesome run of speckled trout, that water salinity was 4 to 6 parts per thousand. So salinity is good, but don't get hung up on it. However, straight river water will hose a speckled trout bite. They don't like that river water. That suspended sediment is tough on their eyes, it's tough on their gills. They don't want to be in it. They're going to leave. They're going to leave because the bait doesn't like being in it either. So speckled trout are going to go where there's a place they can be comfortable and they can have something to eat. All right, so keep all this in mind as time progresses, and you'll be able to kind of get an idea as to where this speckled trout are definitely going to be. Let's see here. All right. Something else too, all right, is bait selection. Okay, bait selection, guys. Let me do this. Bait selection. So we used a lot of suspending baits like this guy this winter, and it worked really, really well. But if you look at fishing reports and fishing trip reviews in LFB Elite from last year, not so much right now, but in the April-May time frame when we started fishing like the normal spring hot spots like the Mr. Go Long Rocks, the jerk baits worked really, really good. I didn't use this specific suspending bait, but I am this year, and I bet it's going to do well. Now, during the winter, this past winter, I'm talking just like 2 weeks ago, today you could have used this. But more natural colors like this has been working a whole lot better than something that's really kind of unnatural, but maybe it sticks out in the environment, right? And something like this, like a chartreuse sparkle beetle. I'm not saying this doesn't catch fish, and it has not caught fish. It does. But this right here, if you're fishing by yourself for speckled trout, this is the equivalent of, we'll say, 15 to 18 speckled trout, if you're good. And this is the equivalent of 35 to 40 speckled trout, if you're good. Okay? And this, usually I would pair this up, a soft plastic, with a smaller jig head, like what you see here. This is an eighth ounce jig head. People who fished the same shorelines I was fishing with this bigger 3/8 ounce jig head were not catching fish. All right, just because I think the fall is too fast, and it spends too much time down between the rocks, and the fish can't get a good shot at it. All right, they want something that's going to be moving a little slower. It's going to be a little more easier for them to eat because they don't have a whole lot of food in their stomachs. They have to make better decisions. All right, now when the water temperature gets really warm, and especially once these fish get on shrimp, by all means, use your flashier chartreuse colored lures because it'll be easier for them to spot it, right? And look, well, I mean, let's be real. A sparkle beetle does not cost nearly as much as this guy, so you don't want to break the bank either. Anyways, though, once that water temperature gets warmer, you can use that heavier jig head too. It's just easier to cast. You can power fish with it better. You can cover more water. You can use popping corks more too. I like my popping cork. Always have one in the boat. A lot of the fish that I cleaned this winter, just looking at my notes here, a lot of the fish I cleaned this winter, all of them, I don't know, 300 plus, that we actually cleaned and looked inside their stomachs, like 3 of them had something in their stomachs. They all had empty stomachs. So that's something to keep in mind. And whatever it was that they had in their stomach was so digested, you couldn't even tell it what it was. I think maybe it was a violet goby because the vertebrae, the spinal cord, was really, really long. So that's something to keep in mind. No shrimp in their stomachs. All right. I mean, guys, I'm looking at my notes here, and I'll tell you, our marsh has freshened up considerably with the closure of the Mr. Go and with the all the high rivers that we've had over the last few years. We've had ridiculously high rivers, so there's been this freshening. and where we have not caught largemouth bass before, we're catching them now. So if bass are your thing, and I'll be honest with you, the little small marsh bass, I can't get crazy about them. I would prefer redfish or speckled trout, but they are starting to get a little bit bigger. You're starting to see your 2 to 4 pound fish show up. If that is your thing, right now, if they haven't started spawning, they're definitely in pre-spawn, and they don't all spawn at the same time. They spawn in waves, but the bass fishing is pretty good right now. So if that's your thing, look for some grass, look for some shallow water with grass or rocks, and whatever your favorite bass bait is, a spinner bait, a jig head, whatever floats your boat, Texas rig crawl, throw that at them. But just my point here is that is another opportunity if that's something you're into. Me, if I'm going to go fishing for bass, they got to be bigger than 10, 12 inches. So that was a lot. And what I'm going to do is look at the questions here and see what it is that we got going on. Boop. All right. Okay, nothing crazy here. All right, guys, if y'all don't have any other questions for me, I don't have anything else for you. So this will be on the channel, and just to kind of give you a heads up as to what's going on, what I'm going to start doing here is using YouTube more. Okay, I never really liked YouTube that much because they tend to change things. So you might get used to doing things one way, and then YouTube will come out and be like, hey, we don't do it that way anymore. Then you're like, and you're pulling your hair out trying to make it happen. But at the end of the day, I think it's better for inshore anglers that I put more content out on YouTube. With that said, the absolute best content that I've got, like all the courses, the fish and trip reviews, and webinar recordings and whatnot, they're all inside LAFB Elite. So you can see more of that at lafishblog.com/courses, and you can see everything it is that members get at lafishblog.com/join. If y'all have any other questions, maybe if you didn't get this live feed, this live stream, just comment below, and I'll get back to you when I can. Tight lines, y'all.